Welcome back to F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. We're continuing on today with Chapter 5, and as usual, I like to start off with one of the more famous quotes that would come from the particular novel. And so in Chapter 5, we're continuing to learn more about Jay Gatsby through our main narrator, Nick Carraway. Nick Carraway says he had passed visibly through 2 states and was entering upon a third. After his embarrassment and his unreasoning joy, he was consumed with wonder at her presence. He'd been full of the idea so long, dreamed it right through to the end, waited with his teeth set, so to speak, at an inconceivable pitch of intensity. Now, in the reaction, he was running down like an overwound clock. Jay Gatsby will finally once again see Daisy. So as Nick is driving up to his house, he thinks it may be on fire, but turning the corner, he sees that it is the Great Gatsby's house, lit from tower to cellar, looking like the World's Fair. Now this is after he has just left in Chapter 4. He's just left going out with Jordan Baker, who asked if he could hold a tea at his house and invite Daisy and Jay Gatsby. So we are trying to have Nick have the two of them meet alone. So now that we're looking at Gatsby's house lit from tower to cellar looking like the World's Fair, this description furthers the mood that Gatsby's place is much like a carnival. And by continuing the development of this carnival-like feeling, Fitzgerald conveys to the reader a sense that, like the carnival, Gatsby, or moreover Gatsby's money, may not be stable, it might not be real, it might be here today, but it might be gone tomorrow. And of course, Gatsby can't hide his excitement that Daisy is coming for tea. He keeps coming over and asking, do you have everything? Is everything going to be all right? Nick is absolutely fine, and he can tell the nervousness that Jay has. Now, Gatsby also, because he feels so thankful to Nick, he offers a job to Nick. Now, remember, Nick already has a job as a bond businessman. He knows that Gatsby works with Meyer Wolfsheim, and he has some foreboding feelings about that, so he declines the offer of a job. So when Daisy comes for tea, Gatsby shows up unannounced and he gets reacquainted with Daisy. Now they go to Gatsby's house afterwards where he shows off all of his possessions. He shows off the house. She is absolutely flabbergasted and just floored by everything she sees. She seems quite positive about it, but she could never imagine that all of these things would belong to Jay Gatsby. So Daisy's opinions start to matter. He revalues things based on her reaction. If she seems to be quite pleased at something, if she seems to just pass something by, he's valuing everything that he has around him based on how she looks at them, because he could care less about everything except for Daisy. So then Gatsby points out the green light as they walk out to the dock, and he shows that across the way, there is her home and there is the green light. He can see it every night. So this is symbolic of Gatsby's longing for Daisy. It could also be a symbolic because it's green for the idea of wealth, but it's usually symbolic for Gatsby's longing. He wants what that light represents. And so, of course, it represents all that in the distance that Gatsby wants to possess. He can't quite reach it, not quite yet. So the rain outside, after we've been spending some time with Gatsby, even beforehand during the tea, there's this constant rain that turns on and off, and the rain outside mirrors the storms within as Gatsby and Daisy meet again. Now when Nick leaves Gatsby and Daisy alone to talk in his house, he stands outside under a tree and he says the rain sounds like their voices. And as the rain begins to stop, signifying the end of their conversation, the sun begins to shine. So Nick perceives that silence has fallen within his house and the sun is beginning to shine, and he enters the house to find Gatsby is shining just like the sun. So our themes that we have in this particular chapter are, of course, his hopes and dreams. Jay Gatsby's dream to finally get back together with Daisy has finally come true. We also have that American dream by the tour of the mansion, where we look at every kind of material possession and worth that comes with that material possession. So the idea of dreams is very heavy throughout this chapter. There's also that sense of the pursuit of an ideal. Gatsby has a long-sought reunion with Daisy, a resumption of some sort of romance. He's absolutely radiant when we see that he and Daisy are back together. He shows off the green light to her, which again shows us that he has this pursuit, this idea that he wants to go and get something, particularly Daisy. So why is chapter 5 in this book? Well, when we take a look at some of the words, some of the elements of literature, some of the figures of speech that Fitzgerald is using, it makes quite a lot of sense. Basically, we start setting up a tea. It's at Nick's house. He wants something simple, something plain, something that Daisy would be recognizing with him. But Gatsby just over exudes. We have the flowers being unnecessary that Nick had brought. For at 2 o'clock, a greenhouse arrived from Gatsby's. Now, this exaggeration or hyperbole of the number of flowers sent over by Gatsby emphasizes the extravagance and the near desperation of his quest. What lengths would he go to in order to win back Daisy, his lost love? Would he buy an entire greenhouse worth of flowers? Likely, yes. The exhilarating ripple of her voice was a wild tonic in the rain is a metaphor that compares the sound of Daisy's voice to a tonic. It compares the sound of Daisy's voice to rain. Quite throughout this entire book, Daisy's voice keeps on getting compared as it goes up and down in volume. Now, it's appropriate to compare Daisy's voice to a wild tonic because her voice is intoxicating to men. Now, tonics can also be a medicinal cure, but a lot of times tonics think of something that is intoxicating. It might be toxic. But maybe perhaps this is a medicinal cure, and the sound of Daisy's voice is a cure for Gatsby's longing. We have a clock that is on the mantle at Nick's house, and the clock is knocked off by Jay Gatsby in his attempt to be suave, his attempt to lean against the mantle, and the clock falls and gets broken. And the clock is probably like Jay Gatsby. When he realized he was poor, he'd never get Daisy, that clock stopped ticking. And so he's trapped in his dreams, just like the clock is trapped in a moment. Now, Fitzgerald might also be implying that Gatsby stopped growing emotionally, is essentially frozen in time until he can get back together with Daisy. So usually when we've been looking at Jay Gatsby in the first 4 chapters, he's very self-assured, he's very easygoing. This, for the first time in chapter 5, we see Gatsby being visibly ill at ease, that he has flaws. He's as pale as death with his hands shoved into his pockets. He's embarrassed at seeing Daisy again. So when Nick leaves and we watch the rain subside and the sun starts shining in, once we go back in, we see him filled with just this unreasonable joy. He's absolutely radiant, and then he is consumed with wonder, almost as if he's bringing back that sense of self-assuredness, almost as if he's coming alive again. So when we take Daisy over and she sees the mansion and all of the belongings inside, she's absolutely overwhelmed, and by the time we get up to the bedroom and we're just throwing all of these beautiful, expensive shirts all around, Daisy starts crying into the shirts. Now, she says because they're beautiful, but in reality, she's likely mourning the fact that she could have had both money and love if she had just waited. She had decided, do I want love and stay with Jay Gatsby? Do I want money and go with Tom? She decided money was more important to her. But had she waited, now she sees she could have had both. Now, perhaps at this moment she's realizing the total emptiness that she has with her life with Tom, and she's overwhelmed with the thoughts of a dream that she now cannot have. And so the tears just start falling. So now let's take a look at Gatsby's point of view. Now that we've gotten our dream, we're back together with Daisy, at least in his mind. Nick says, Gatsby had been full of the idea of so long and dreamed it right through to the end, waited with his teeth set, so to speak, at an inconceivable pitch of intensity. Now in the reaction, he was running down like an overwound clock. Now this is the second time in this chapter that Fitzgerald is using a clock to compare Gatsby and his dream. The first time we saw it was Nick's broken clock that was frozen in time, but this time now he's a clock that has been wound too tightly, and it seems as if the spring will break and absolutely uncoil. It will come undone. Now, this may be used as a symbol to alert the reader that this is the climax of the story. We've made it with Daisy. It's probably all downhill from here. Now, this passage reflects not only Gatsby's life and dream, but it can also reflect America in the 1920s, because as World War I ended, the Roaring Twenties began. As the American dream starts changing more towards materialistic things, the stock market is growing, and by 1929, the stock market had reached an unprecedented level, kind of like an overwound clock, and the spring breaks and the stock market crashed. Now, it's an uncanny prediction because this book was written in 1924. Fitzgerald would not have known it when publishing the book in 1925, but he surely would have known that the growth could not continue for long. And lastly, we do begin to see the unwinding of the clock. After everything that he's shown to Daisy, Daisy tumbled short of his dreams. So like much of The Great Gatsby, including all of the symbols and themes that has to do with and is associated with dreams, Daisy is his dream. He's been dreaming about her for years, and now he has the reality. Well, reality doesn't exactly match up to dreams sometimes. So this is definitely a symbolic meaning as well as literal. Oftentimes one dreams and builds such an illusion that when the dream actually comes true, it's often less than you'd hoped for, and this is true for Gatsby. This romantic vision of Daisy that Gatsby has created for years, much as he's created himself into it, starts dissipating as reality sets in that Daisy is flawed, she's only human. Now, this statement also reflects the sentiments of the American people as the elusive American dream, once easy to attain, is now beginning to tumble far short after World War I and as we see in the Roaring Twenties, where it looks like everybody can live their extravagances just like that wound clock. Sooner or later, it has got to uncoil. And we're starting to already see in Chapter 5 the beginnings of the uncoiling. Thank you so much for stopping by for Chapter 5 of The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. If you'd like to learn more about his book, I have a whole entire playlist that I go through all of the chapters and an introduction and conclusion. If you want to learn more besides The Great Gatsby, please leave in the comments what other books you'd like to see me do. And I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for stopping by.